Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do a book haul for the month of May, my second book haul for the month of May. If you recall, I did a part 1 where I opened a curated book box that I had ordered from Good Neighbor Bookstore, and I'll put a link to that video in the description box down below if you would like to check it out. I had a lot of fun opening it. I am going to mention the 4 books that were in that book box here, because I want to make sure I have all my ducks in a row when I do a future book haul revisit, and just to eliminate the idea that there might be books that I forget in a future book haul revisit, because I don't usually do 2. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, I will mention those 4 books. Before we do that, if you're watching this, I managed to film 3 videos on the Friday before Memorial Day, so go me. Doesn't mean anything, except that I'm really proud of myself, and now I get to enjoy the holiday weekend with my husband. So let's talk about those 4 books really quickly. The first one is Life Went On Anyway, Stories by Oleg Sentsov, translated by William Blacker. Then there was The Bear by Andrew Krivak. And then there was How Free Speech Saved Democracy, The Untold History of How the First Amendment Became an Essential Tool for Securing Liberty and Social Justice by Christopher M. Finan, and The Tiny Americans by Devin Murphy. If you want to hear more about those 4 books, check out the link in the description box down below where I did my full unboxing. Let's get to the actual Friday reads. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 8 books to talk about here. Most of them actually came from Independent Bookstore Day, which was at the end of April. So I actually did a really good job not purchasing books for most of May. I got 1 book during the month of May, and I did the curated book box in the month of May. But otherwise, everything actually came from April and was planned for Independent Bookstore Day. So let's dive in. I am going to say I'm going to have to rely on the plots that are on the book Dust Jacket for this video, because in order to film 3 videos in one day, I have not done the amount of prep that I would usually do for a book haul, but it'll be fine. We're going to roll with it. The first one is Elena Knows by Claudia Piñeiro, translated by Francis Riddle. This was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize. Did not win. I'll put my reaction video in the description box down below as well if you'd like to check that out. This is something I am definitely looking forward to reading this year. It would also hit a prompt on the Montana Book Company's Reading Challenge for 2022, so I'm going to need to read it this year, and I'm really looking forward to it. I've heard a lot of really great things. A lot of people who commented on my winter reaction for the International Booker mentioned that this was the book that they had been rooting for, so I'm going to have to get to it at some point. If you are unfamiliar, when Rita's body is found hanging in the belfry of a church she devoted herself to, the investigation is swiftly closed. But her mother, Elena, refuses to accept the police's version of what happened, and despite her physical limitations imposed by her illness, embarks on a journey to call in an old debt. Unfolding over a single day, Elena's arduous trek across Buenos Aires forces her to redefine everything she thought she knew about her relationship with her daughter, while confronting her with the ramifications of a fleeting encounter 20 years earlier. Written in an engrossing style that recalls John Cheever and Thomas Bernhard, this is a moving novel about hypocrisy that asks us if we can still change our views late in life and find a will to go on despite our failing bodies. This is published by Charco Press, and I'm really looking forward to it. Now, in my book hauls, I like to read a little bit of the opening of each book, and this book haul will be no different from that. So let's go part 1, Morning, Second Pill. The trick is to lift up the right foot just a few centimeters off the floor, move it forward through the air just enough to get past the left foot, and when it gets as far as it can go, lower it. That's all it is, Elena thinks. But she thinks this, and even though her brain orders the movement, her right foot doesn't move. It does not lift up, it does not move forward through the air, it does not lower back down. It's so simple, but it doesn't do it. So Elena sits and waits. And that is the opening of Elena Knows by Claudia Piñeiro, translated by Francis Riddle. Really looking forward to this book. I've heard so many good things about it. The next book that I had gotten was the second book that I had ordered to pick up on Independent Bookstore Day. So both of these are books that I ordered from Montana Book Company so I could pick them up in the store on Independent Bookstore Day. This one is The Trees by Percival Everett. Percival Everett was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2021. I'll put my reaction video to that down below. He lost to Louise Erdrich for The Night Watchman. Since he was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, it feels like his stature as a writer has really elevated, because he went from a mostly unknown author to someone who is pretty frequently talked about. A lot of people read and really liked The Trees, and I am looking forward to giving him a try. I had thought that this might have a chance for this year's Pulitzer Prize. Ultimately, that proved not to be the case, but I am still really looking forward to this book, which sounds kind of twisty and a little bit different and very interesting. When a pair of detectives from the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation arrive in Money, Mississippi to investigate a series of brutal murders, they find at each crime scene an unexpected second dead body, that of a man who resembles Emmett Till. After meeting resistance from the local sheriff, his deputy, the coroner, and a string of racist white townsfolk, the MBI detectives suspect that these are killings of retribution. Then they discover eerily similar murders taking place in rapid succession all over the country. The past, it seems, refuses to be buried. The uprising has begun. In this provocative page-turner that takes direct aim at racism and police violence, Percival Everett offers a devastating critique of white supremacy and confronts the painful legacy of lynching in the United States. So obviously this is not an easy book. It's definitely a book that brings up a lot of painful things and kind of deliberately does not let people off the hook. I remember seeing a blurb from an interview where someone asked Percival Everett something about making some of his white readers uncomfortable, and his response was a pretty blunt, "I don't care." And good for him, actually. I kind of support that. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. It won't be a pleasant read, but that's fine. Not every book needs to be pleasant. This is published by Grey Wolf Press, and part 1 is called Rise. Chapter 1. Money, Mississippi looks exactly like it sounds. Named in that persistent southern tradition of irony with the attendant tradition of nescience, the name becomes slightly sad, a marker of self-conscious ignorance that might as well be embraced because, let's face it, it isn't going away. Just outside Money, there was what might have loosely been considered a suburb, perhaps even called a neighborhood, a not-so-small collection of vinyl-sided, split-level ranch and shotgun houses called, unofficially, Small Change. In one of the dying grass backyards around the fraying edges of an empty above-ground pool, one adorned with faded mermaids, a small family gathering was happening. The gathering was neither festive nor special, but usual. And that is the opening of The Trees by Percival Everett. Really looking forward to that book as well. And then aside from one of these books, everything else came from Independent Bookstore Day, but was a little bit more of a surprise. So while we were in Montana Book Company, an employee named Abby, who's a delight, introduced us to The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper, and I'm really looking forward to reading this book. It doesn't sound like anything I would have picked up for myself or gravitated to on my own, but as soon as she started describing it, I was immediately interested in it, and she has a good track record for recommendations with me and Joel, so here we are. Originally published in the UK to rave reviews, The Wolf Den is the first in a trilogy of novels reimagining the lives of women who have long been overlooked. I mean, I'm sold right there. Amara was once the beloved daughter of a doctor in Greece until her father's sudden death plunged her mother into destitution. Now Amara is a slave and prostitute in Pompey's notorious Wolf Den brothel, or Lupanar, owned by a cruel and ruthless man. Intelligent and resourceful, she is forced to hide her true self, but her spirit is far from broken. Buoyed by the sisterhood she forges with the brothel's other woman, Amara finds solace in the laughter and hopes of all they share. For the streets of the city are alive with opportunity. Here, even the lowest-born slave can dream of a new beginning, but everything in Pompeii has a price. How much will Amara's freedom cost her? Another thing that's going to be really interesting about this is that I haven't mentioned this in a previous video, but Joel and I are planning a trip to Italy later this year. We've been planning a trip to Italy for a decade or longer, and for various reasons haven't managed to do it. And one of the locations we are going is Pompeii. So this could be a fun book to read, even just for that. It is published by, I can't find it, Sterling, and let's do the opening of this book. Part 1 is called AD 74, Februarius. Chapter 1, Baths, Wine, and Sex Make Fate Come Faster, Roman Maxim. She holds her hands up as if in prayer, steam evaporating from her skin. Laughter and female voices surround her, a confusion of sound echoing off the stone. She filters it out, focusing on her fingers, turning them, watching the water drip down, the steam rise. They could be anybody's hands, she thinks. They could belong to anybody. But they belong to Felix. And that is the opening of The Wolf's Den by Elodie Harper. Looking forward to that. Hopefully I'll read it before we go on our trip. Now, this is a bit of a surprise that it ended up in my library. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara. So if you follow along, you probably know I am one of the people that absolutely hates A Little Life, like hates it. Really don't like it. I included it in my video of the worst books I've ever read. I'll put a link to that down below as well. I did like Hanya Yanagihara's first book, though, which was People in the Trees. So I had no intention of reading this book. How did it end up in my library, you might ask, and why an ARC? Well, Chelsea from the Montana Book Company was reading it and was very curious what I would think of it. She ultimately DNF'd it, but she kind of wanted to know what I would think. So here it is. I don't know when I'll get around to it. I'm not going to put any priority on it because I wasn't really intending to read it, but she did get me a little bit curious. So we'll see. We'll see. No promises, but we'll see. So I already kind of know the premise of this one well enough, I think, to spitball. So it's set in 3 different versions of New York in 3 different time periods. I believe they are 100 years apart. 1893, 1993, and 2093. And all of them involve, I think, maybe I should just read the description of it. In 1893, New York is part of the free states where people may live with and love whomever they please, or so it seems. And in 1993, Manhattan besieged by the AIDS epidemic, a young Hawaiian man lives with his much older, wealthier partner, hiding his troubled childhood and the fate of his father. And in 2093, a world riven by plagues and governed by totalitarian rule, a powerful scientist's damaged granddaughter tries to navigate life without him and solve the mystery of her husband's disappearances. And these sections, I guess, combine, and I don't know. So at some point, I'll give it a try. Book 1 is Washington Square. And the book opens, this is published by Doubleday. He had come into the habit before dinner of taking a walk around the park, 10 laps as slow as he pleased on some evenings, briskly on others, and then back up the stairs of the house and to his room to wash his hands and straighten his tie before descending again to the table. Today, though, as he was leaving, the little maid handing him his gloves said, "Mr. Bingham says to remind you that your brother and sister are coming tonight for supper." And he said, "Yes, thank you, Jane, for reminding me," as if he'd in fact forgotten, and she made a little curtsy and closed the door behind him. He would have to go more quickly than he would were his time his own, but he found himself being deliberately contrary, walking instead at a slower pace, listening to the clicks of his boot heels on the pavestones ringing purposefully in the cold air. That is the opening of To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara. And then Charlie, one of the other owners of Montana Book Company, and I did a book swap. I brought a book that they had been wanting to read that I needed to unload off of my shelves, and they had discovered that they had an ARC of The Promise by Damon Galgut, so we did a swap, and here it is. Obviously, you're probably familiar, not obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but you're probably familiar because this went on to win the Booker Prize, and it's been on my to-do list since it made the long list and the short list for it. This is because I've been talking about this book a lot since the long list. It's about a family that promises or makes a promise to their black servant in South Africa, and then it's told through several funerals. I can't remember how many. And each funeral jumps ahead in time, and it's about how that promise is broken. And of course, that is sort of a stand-in or a metaphor for race relations in South Africa. Sounds really interesting. I've heard some mixed feedback about it, but I'm really looking forward to reading this. It is published by Yerba Editions, and let's do the opening of this book. Part 1, Ma. The moment the metal box speaks her name, Amor knows it's happened. She's been in a tense, headachy mood all day, almost like she had a warning in a dream but can't remember what it is. Some sign or image just under the surface. Trouble down below, fire underground. But when the words are said to her aloud, she does not believe them. She closes her eyes and shakes her head. No, it can't be true, what her aunt has just told her. Nobody is dead. It's a word, that's all. She looks at the word lying there on the desk like an insect on its back with no explanation. And that is The Promise by Damon Galgut. We're getting there. And then there was a giveaway on Independent Bookstore Day for a short story by Mieko Kawakami and translated by David Boyd from Europa Editions. It's called Chandelier, an original story. I don't know what it's about. I have not managed to read it yet, but I figured I would include it in this little book haul. And let's do the opening line. And you like that? People sometimes ask. Like what? I know exactly what they're asking, but that's how I always respond. They continue. Don't you, I don't know, get bored? I can see the amazement mixed with confusion on their faces, but it's perfectly obvious they're making fun of me. Deep down, they might even be kind of disgusted. Whatever it is they're thinking, I wish they'd just keep it to themselves. That is the opening of Chandelier, an original story by Mieko Kawakami, translated by David Boyd, which was a giveaway on Independent Bookstore Day. Then I figured I would just include it in this book haul because it is something I want to read. Now, after we left Montana Book Company on Independent Bookstore Day, we walked down the street where there's a used bookstore in Helena called Aunt Bonnie's Books. And I found T is for Trespass by Sue Grafton. This edition is published by Penguin. Why is this significant? Well, if you have followed along at all, especially with any of my book hauls, you know that I have been rebuilding my Sue Grafton book collection. I had started reading her books somewhere around the year 2001. I worked my way all the way up to P is for Peril, which I read somewhere around 2013, 14. And then when she died, instead of just finishing the series, I went back to the beginning. Now, when I moved to Montana, I thought to myself, if I reread these books at all, I'm probably going to do it on ebook, because at that time I was reading more ebooks. And so I got rid of all of my Sue Grafton books. I don't really read ebooks anymore. I prefer physical books or audio. So I started reacquiring my collection. Now, why is this one significant? It's the last one. My collection is complete. I have every Sue Grafton Kinsey Milhone book that has been published. They're back in my library, and I can continue working my way through them. So this one is, I know it's a little bit different from the other ones because I believe the perspective is not Kinsey's as usual. All the back says is, before letting someone into your home and granting access to the intimate details of your life, it's a good idea to run a background check. But as Kinsey Milhone is about to discover, a clean record means nothing if it belongs to a stolen identity, and the consequences can be deadly. I'm a fan of the Sue Grafton books, which you know if you've been following along with my book hauls. And here we go. Chapter 1, Solana. She had a real name, of course, the one she'd been given at birth and had used for so much of her life, but now she had a new name. She was Solana Rojas, whose personhood she usurped. Gone was her former self, eradicated in the wake of her new identity. This was as easy as breathing for her. And that is T is for Trespass by Sue Grafton. The final book in my May book haul, both parts, is Yerba Buena by Nina Lacour. This is published by Flatiron Books. And I fully admit there's a shallow reason that this jumped out to me. I had seen the cover pop up. I had seen brief descriptions of it before, but it really wasn't until I actually spent time with the plot description and realized that this is an LGBTQ novel. It's about lesbians. That all of a sudden I was like, oh, cool, I would read that. I admit, yeah, that's the thing that got me interested in the book. Sue me. So here's what the jacket says. When Sarah Foster runs away from home at 16, she leaves behind the girl she once was, capable of trust and intimacy. Years later in Los Angeles, she is a sought-after bartender renowned as much for her brilliant cocktails as for the mystery that clings to her. Across the city, Emily Dubois is in a holding pattern, yearning for the beauty and community her Creole grandparents cultivated but unable to commit. On a whim, she takes a job arranging flowers at the glamorous restaurant, Yerba Buena, and falls into an affair with the married owner. The morning Emily and Sarah first meet, their connection is immediate, but the damage both women carry and the choices they have made pull them apart again and again. When Sarah's old life catches up to her, upending everything she thought she wanted, just as Emily has finally gained her own sense of purpose, they must decide if their love is more powerful than their pasts. At once exquisite and expansive, astonishing in its humanity and heart, Yerba Buena is a propulsive journey through the lives of two women trying to find somewhere or someone to call home. And I love the idea of a romance where people have to try to get over their own baggage and all the stuff they carry with them. So that really sold me on this book as well. Let's do the opening of this book, shall we? Chapter 1, An Afternoon in Spring. They rode together up the hill. Blur of trees and sky outside, groan of brakes, a current between them. With each curve of the road, the press of one bare shoulder against another until the bus slowed and stopped. The doors folded open, they stepped out to the street. Armstrong Drive dead-ended there, a parking lot, a ranger station, the entrance to the woods. Sarah unzipped her backpack and pulled out a thermos, unscrewed the lid and sipped. Their fingers touched as Annie took it, and Sarah watched Annie press her mouth against its metal rim and drink. That is the opening of Yerba Buena by Nina Lacour. And those are all of the books that I brought into my library in the month of May. If you have thoughts about any of these books, if you've read them, if you have feedback on any, let me know in the comment section down below. If you have recommendations based on any of these, let me know as well. And as always, I really appreciate your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.